Remember our agreement? We have an agreement about how we behave in a store, Herbert.
Hey, I want candy marshmallows.
When he gets like this, I just don't know how to make him stop.
You try beating his ass?
What's with the bell?
You must have lost your goddamn mind.
Hello YouTube, start recording and whatnot. Yeah, we're gonna be continuing on with our nostalgic deep dives, just getting more further introspection and light on certain shows from when I was growing up, for sure, and some that are a little older as well as possibly some movies and such. We've got a whole new list going up soon, so we'll definitely be peeking into those shortly once we finish our initial list. First, I do want to pop into this and check out this video about the PJs. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the PJs. This is also another older adult animation. I'm pretty sure this aired initially on Comedy Central, though. I think it's either Comedy Central or it might have been BET as well, possibly. I forget. But yeah, it was this it's stop motion, honestly, because I think they're like claymation. But it's this black animated show that pretty much follows this family in the project, sort of on the stylings of like Good Times and such. But I want to say a little more raunchy on the inside. You follow the family of the superintendent of the building, who handles all the maintenance and such. And yeah, I remember it being like one of the more wilder takes. I know they recently done a remake of Good Times that I think was trying to like capture the same similar energy, but I feel like just didn't really hit the same mark. But yeah, so the first video we're gonna hop into today,
once upon a time,
is gonna be why Eddie Murphy's The PJs ended. Here's why, by Hype Plus.
The PJs. If you grew up in the 90s or early 2000s, you may remember that as the opening line of the official theme song to The PJs, performed by the legendary George Clinton. The PJs was an American adult stop-motion sitcom created by and starring Eddie Murphy, along with Larry Wilmore and Steve Tompkins, both former In Living Color writers. With stop-motion animation created by the Will Vincent Studios, it was produced by the Murphy Company, Imagine Entertainment, in association with Touchstone Pictures, a milestone for the Walt Disney Company because it was their first adult-oriented animated show. A show featuring the voice of one of the biggest comedic performers of all time.
Wait. This was a Disney show?
In studios, it was produced by the Murphy Company, Imagine Entertainment, in association with Touchstone Pictures, a milestone for the Walt Disney Company because it was their first adult-oriented animated show.
Holy shit. I did not know it was an actual Disney show, but that show was actually kind of crazy. I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, I could be misremembering the show completely and thinking that it was wild, but I swear it was on like Comedy Central or like Adult Swim when I saw it initially.
A show featuring the voice of one of the biggest comedic performers of all time that also premiered with such huge ratings. It's often revered today as a classic, but people are often surprised how short-lived the show actually was outside of syndication when you compare it to other similar shows airing around that time, like The Simpsons and Futurama. So here's why The PJs ended. The show was created with the actor, comedian, and writer Larry Wilmore. Decided he no longer wanted to be a hired hand and decided to create his own projects. After informing his agent and after pitching several spec scripts, Larry was offered a development deal with Touchstone Pictures / the Walt Disney Company. Shortly after, Wilmore also received a call informing him that Eddie Murphy was interested in doing an animated show. Wilmore initially passed on the idea because he didn't want to do a Saturday morning cartoon, but changed his mind when it was further explained it would be a primetime sitcom instead. Murphy, who recently worked with Disney voicing the character Mushu in 1997's Mulan, wanted to do the sitcom, but felt all the animated sitcoms of that time looked the exact same. So Murphy pitched Muppet-like puppets in the projects, an idea Murphy Murphy had on Thanksgiving 1997 while watching the 1960 show Thunderbirds. They decided to go with the claymation instead. Wilmore enlisted help of
So it is claymation. I'm sure it could be like actual like an animation style. But yeah, I thought it was the
friend, writer Steve Tompkins, and from there they began to shape the world of Thurgood Stubbs and the inhabitants of his neighborhood. The show's premise and themes. The PJs tell the story of Thurgood Stubbs and his wife Muriel in the Lawrence Hilton Jacobs housing project, where he is the superintendent, and the many adventures of the Stubbs and their friends, while taking a satirical view of the ups and downs of life in the Chicago, Illinois area, which is modeled after the Brewster Douglass public housing project in Detroit, Michigan. The show deals with social problems such as government efficiency, gang war, racial inequality, drug abuse, and poverty. At its core, the PJs is about people pulling together in the best of worst of times and helping each other out. Cast, crew, and production. The show boasts an amazing supporting voice cast, including Loretta Devine, Jeanette Dubois, Jennifer Lewis, Cassie Davis, and a slew of other great voice artists.
I mean, talk about damn. That's a star-studded voice cast. I might have to go back and watch this again.
With the claymation animation being produced by Will Vinton Studios, notable for creating the iconic California Raisins. The show being the first primetime series to feature stop-motion animation using the process of foamation. Each half-hour episode cost about $1 million and took over 2 months to produce. Will Vinton Studios' team included 150 people manipulating the bulbous foam figures on 4 identical sets. Protests and criticism. Before it made its official debut, the show was accused of showing TV audiences a negative view of inner city life and sparked protests leading up to its premiere, but it still managed to generate strong ratings. We were concerned that the show does not present an accurate and honest depiction of the African American community. It does present racially demeaning and offensive stereotypes. Earl Afari Hutchinson, the director of Coalition Against Media Exploitation.
I mean, I can understand that. But that's like you could say the same with like every black exploitation movie.
I kind of scratched.
It's sort of like with like Boondocks. Like it can be like you poke fun at like certain aspects of the community and race or whatnot, but at the same time, you're not just like bullying anybody or making fun out of malice or whatnot. It's usually like a general theme that either a kind of twisted thought that you might have had at some point, or that you've heard somebody have at some point as well, or just an over exaggeration of a certain theme or type. But I mean, at the same time, even those over exaggerations can be real to a degree. So
my head why Eddie Murphy's doing this, because it shows no love at all for black people. I'm not saying that we're above being made fun of and stuff like that, but it's really hateful, I think, towards black people. Plain and simple. Spike Lee. We thought the show was emphasizing the negative, especially in
damn, I mean, Spike Lee's on it saying like, hey yo, what you doing?
Showing African American men drinking 40s. They agreed that after the first 13 episodes they completed have aired, Thurgood would stop drinking. NAACP branch president Billy Green. We met with the NAACP. They have no problem with the show now, but when we first showed them a scene with characters drinking 40s, they couldn't even hear the joke being made all around that scene. Namely, that it's stupid to sit around drinking all that liquor. These characters come from my life. I'm not allowed the same autobiographical options that a white writer would. Wilmore. If you ever been to a project, you know we've got crackheads, you've got hot chicks, you've got old croonies. Jeanette Dubois. There's a double standard. If a black actor played Smokey on a drama like NYPD Blue, he might get an Emmy nod for portraying a victim of addiction. But we're condemned because our addict's a cartoon character depicted as a multifaceted person? I don't get it. Tompkins. The PJs isn't belittling those who live in the housing developments. This is a unit of people who know each other, care about each other. They're into each other's lives. They're all into each other's business. Loretta Devine. Show's premiere. The show debuted on Fox on January 10, 1999, following the network's coverage of the NFC divisional playoffs. 2 days later, the second episode aired in its regular Tuesday night time slot. In its debut, the PJs pushed aside much of its competition to finish 13th for the week. Eddie's absence. When it came time to promote the PJs, Murphy himself stayed away from the talk show circuit and other interviews concerning the PJs, unlike other major movie film stars that was linked to high-profile TV projects, even though his name was used in every piece of marketing material. The reason for his unavailability, sources close to him say, is that Murphy has been too wrapped up with films and family to devote time to discussing the show. The PJs wasn't the first project to deal with Murphy's absence. Aside from press junkets, Murphy has stayed off talk shows and away from print interviews from other films of that time, including Dr. Dolittle, Milan, and Holy Man. Murphy had been missing from the spotlight after the highly publicized May 1997 incident in which he was stopped by police in West Hollywood and being accompanied by a known transsexual prostitute. In several of the show's 8 executive producers said they did not feel that Murphy's unavailability to promote the show would hurt the show. Eddie has a very busy film schedule. He's doing 3 films with Imagine, plus working on this show. His performance and his contributions is promotion enough. Tony Kratz, Imagine Television co-chairman. In May of 1999, the New York Times article reported that Murphy denied reports of walking away from the show after being pulled from its original lineup. Eddie was just frustrated when we first got the news, says a source close to Murphy, but he's been in the studio recording new episodes, and it's all moving forward. Fox eventually ordered 22 additional episodes of the show for the following season. Allegedly, during the show's second season, Murphy became too busy with the film to come in and record for the show, so that led to the hiring of actor Phil Morris. Got called to come in on the PJs because Eddie was in New Jersey and didn't want to come out for every episode, and if they could find somebody to fill in for him for Thurgood Stubbs, so be it. So they hired me, and then I record with the other cast, but I would be in a separate booth so that if Eddie chose to be in that episode, they could just lift my voice right out. Morris. Even though Phil Morris debuted as the voice actor for Thurgood in the 11th episode of season 2, it wasn't until season 3 that Murphy stopped voicing him altogether, over disputes as well as being involved in other projects at the time. Other notable changes included smaller production budgets, outsourcing from Will Vincent Studios to Charge Productions, and Disney having no involvement in the 3rd season, as they were uninterested in making a 3rd season. Network switch and cancellation. After 2 seasons on Fox, the show moved to WB for a 3rd and final season. It began to air on Friday and Sunday night primetime slots, but unlike the previous seasons that early on saw an average of 9.1 viewers every week, the ratings would decline, and the budget did not justify a season 4. The show would ultimately end on May 20th, 2001, leaving 2 episodes unaired until 2003. Lawsuit. In April of 2002, it was reported that a Chicago janitor, Tally Collier, filed a lawsuit and that the show stole from an amateur documentary of Collier's life. He was seeking $75,000 in actual damages and $10 million in punitive damages from star and producer Murphy, Imagine Entertainment, including producers Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, and Tony Katz, animator Will Vincent, and the Fox Network. Collier alleges that the show stole his likeness for the supporting character of Sanchez, who speaks with an electronic voice box and walks with a cane, like Collier, and the likeness of others in the video, which was shot by Daryl Murphy, no relation to Eddie, and submitted to an Oprah Winfrey show in 1998. Murphy also requested that Winfrey pass the tape on to various Hollywood folk, including Howard, Spike Lee, Tom Hanks, Quincy Jones, Fred Williamson. However, Winfrey never responded to Murphy's unsolicited submission, and it's not clear that she actually passed the film on to anyone. The copyright infringement lawsuit against actor Eddie Murphy's production company came to an end. After 6 years of litigation, the 7th Circuit dismissed this claim. District Court ruled that the infringement had not occurred, explaining that the works are not similar and defendants did not have access to the videotape. The court also found that the PJs were created before the videotape. Show's legacy. A total of 44 episodes airing during the show's run of 2 years and 4 months. The PJs won 3 Emmy Awards and 1 Annie Award. The show has lived a second life in syndication on networks like Fuse, MTV2, and Cartoon Network's Adult Swim throughout the years. Most recently with a home video release and being added to streaming services, including Pluto TV, Peacock, and Kevin Hart's Laugh Out Loud. And more importantly, the show is commonly mentioned in conversations of blacks in animation. And for its animation style alone, the PJs is considered one of the most innovative sitcoms in history. And Thurgood, another memorable character under Murphy's belt. Stay up to date with the latest news and comedy by subscribing here to our YouTube channel. And follow Comedy Hype on all of our social media platforms. And look out for our new original content on our new streaming service.
Okay, so I'm about to say, I was like, WB and Fox, I really didn't remember it being on there. But yeah, that's because I think I did see it on Adult Swim probably after it was canceled on Fox and I guess the WB. Cause yeah, only 3 seasons. That's still not bad. I definitely got to check it out. So I guess Eddie Murphy is mainly the voice actor through most of the first season, and then it wasn't until was like what, partly through the second season that he finally like just completely stopped altogether. And then through the third season, it was still the same guy, I guess. But yeah, no, the PJs, I have to see some of the clips again from the show, because like even with this, it doesn't really portray, I mean, sure, they're drinking like malt liquor and whatnot, but I mean, that's pretty much the same with like what they do in King of the Hill on a regular basis, just like straight on the theme song, they're drinking beers and whatnot. So I feel like that's nothing like too crazy. So it might not have been as like out of pocket as I thought. I really did not know that it was produced by Disney. I did not know Disney created this, had anything to do with this at all. That completely surprised me. So, well, okay, Disney, shouts out to y'all, and Eddie Murphy, that boy. So we're gonna move right along here. For the last video that we're going to dive into today for our adult animation deep dives, we're going to dive into the Boondocks. I mean, there's no need, I feel like, even need to explain or, you know, introduce the Boondocks, you know, as far as adult animation goes, and then adult black animation. Black adult animation, I don't know, goes, especially, this is like the cream of the crop, like the tried and true, the OG, when it comes to like black comedy and animation especially. So yeah, we're gonna take a deep dive here. We have Why the Boondocks Was Better Than You Remember, a chill retrospective by Chill Review. So let's take a look.
To most people who have never seen the Boondocks, it probably just comes off as a typical black comedy. And I don't mean black comedy like Fight Club or Shaun of the Dead. I mean black comedy like Friday or the PJs. Holy shit, remember the PJs?
Yes.
Probably not. And at first glance, I don't blame anyone for thinking that all they get out of watching the Boondocks is some cheap jokes about black stereotypes and terrible bling rap era music blasting in the background. That was kind of par for the course when it came to black entertainment in that era. And I find that a lot of people think that race is the only factor in the Boondocks' comedy, and while I wouldn't disagree that racial humor is a large part of its jokes, there's also several other hilarious jokes and scenes that have basically nothing to do with race at all. And that's just one of the reasons I love the Boondocks so much. There is just so much more under the surface than what it originally appears to be. Like most shows, the tone, presentation, and overall quality of the Boondocks varies from season to season. Season 2 was arguably the funniest season of them all, with many of the show's most iconic memes and references coming from that season. Season 3 is a little hit and miss for me, but it also has a handful of the show's best episodes among its ranks. And season 4 is a complete dumpster fire that should have never existed in the first place. But there's something about season 1 that has always stood out above the others to me. I've been watching the episodes from season 1 since they were released almost 20 years ago, and despite how many times I've seen them, I pretty much never get tired of watching them. Comedy tends to get old after a while, but when it's mixed with great storytelling and compelling character moments, it helps to keep those jokes fresh for much longer than usual. The Boondocks is one of the best examples of this that I can think of. Even though every episode in season 1 is not directly connected, they all serve to paint a grander picture of not only the characters depicted, but the world and universe that they operate in as well. Throughout the 15 episodes of season 1, every major character is given their moment to shine and have their personality, their worldview, their flaws, their desires, and their failures depicted in hilarious, endearing, and memorable ways. Where most comedies create characters to be cheap one-note jokes or parodies, the Boondocks manages to create satirical characters that still feel like real people.
No,
for the most part. The first episode of the
even
Boondocks is
Uncle
titled
Ruckus being like the most outrageous and outlandish thing, it's still like to a degree can be understood. Like it's not like it's like completely out of, I mean it is out of pocket 1,000%, but it's not like it's completely out of this world or unreasonable or understandable.
Garden Party, and it opens with the main character of the show, Huey, explaining through narration that he is not a prophet, but he sometimes has prophetic dreams.
Announcement to make. Jesus was black, Ronald Reagan was the devil, and the government is lying about 9/11. Thank you for your time and good night.
This opening scene serves as a perfect introduction to the show and everything that it's about. It's deceptively calm, utterly hilarious, unpredictably outrageous, and behind all of that, it's It's attempting to speak about forbidden truths, or at least what the writers believe are forbidden truths.
Exactly, like just pushing the envelope in the sense just to create the conversation in general, let alone, not even necessarily to put out a perspective of its own, based off a certain, culture of people and how they live and like the things that they, deal with and understand to a certain degree, definitely exaggerated a lot in most cases, but even the exaggeration is also like understandable and relatable to a degree.
If a main character is supposed to be a reflection or an embodiment of the main themes and messages of a series, then Huey Freeman is a damn near perfect main character for the Boondocks. Huey is, as he would put it, a black revolutionary freedom fighter. Huey is usually a very reserved and laid-back person, but like any anime protagonist, despite being a small child, he's always ready to throw hands with any grown-ass men who try to get in his way. And that little definitely has hands. Huey is a sensible, educated, and well-meaning person, unfortunately trapped in a corrupt and biased world full of morons and manipulative, power-hungry monsters. So, the regular world, I guess. Throughout season 1, Huey constantly and passionately fights against the injustices that he encounters, whether it's racism, classism, catching local murderers, uplifting the spirits of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., or even protecting Oprah Winfrey from would-be kidnappers. No matter what seemingly impossible task is put in front of him, Huey is always ready to fight for those who need him. And as admirable as that quality is, it's also exhausting and borderline masochistic. It can be tiring enough fighting your own battles, so spending a lifetime, especially your youth, fighting...
That scene always hilarious.
It can be tiring enough fighting your own battles, so spending a lifetime, especially your youth.
But I mean, it's obvious because, like, yeah, you see that in the show that, like, this boy, Huey, gets exhausted by the end of the series. Just, like, having to, like, he even, like, from saying his, like, normal tie-ins to say something, what is it? Because even there's a point where, like, Grandpa even tells him to, like, say something, invoke some encouragement or say something encouraging or whatever, spiritual or not, and he even has to like okay and has to just throw some shit out there.
Fighting other people's battles is guaranteed to be a somewhat miserable existence.
Like, y'all
Huey
not gonna
says it
listen
best
anyway,
himself.
so why?
The life of a black hero has never been for the meek of heart.
Despite his clear passion for justice and revolution, Huey is not shown to be a happy person. In fact, Huey never smiles throughout the entire series. Seriously, go back and watch it if you don't believe me. That is always scowling. And while the Boondocks is a comedy first, Huey's character serves as this constant and sobering reminder that underneath these jokes lies real pain and trauma that oppressed and marginalized people face every day in America and around the world. The first episode does a great job of setting up Huey's role in this narrative and his troubled mindset while being trapped in this rich, white paradise of suburbia.
I don't know. I don't want to move here, but I don't really want Granddad to lose his house. He worked his whole life to get here.
Oh well, I shot a nigga.
The second episode of season 1 is about the
And
trial
this
of
is
R.
so
Kelly.
funny, like the undercutting of like the message with like a joke and everything, and that being the joke in itself, and not just to be offensive or to push past it or whatnot, but still make it somewhat lighthearted and roundabout, but to still create that conversation. It's just ingenious. It's beautiful.
Who you may know from all of the classic music that he made in the 90s and 2000s. Unless you're one of the many women he sexually assaulted, then you probably know him better for other things. One thing that the writers of the Boondocks were amazing at were creating plots for episodes that were topical in the moment, yet also managed to stay topical years later. Whether this was dumb luck or just genius foresight, I'm not sure, but the fact that there was an infamous R. Kelly trial happening at the time of the writing of this episode, and then another infamous R. Kelly trial 15 years later is pretty amazing.
I mean, is it, or it just shows that shit don't change? Like, they were surprised that he was finally sentenced to prison, like he wasn't already on trial for some wild shit like this already. Like,
And then if R. Kelly goes to jail, I'll piss on your cat.
And there's more instances like this where the Boondocks becomes a sort of Black Simpsons, where they're predicting the future of culture seemingly at will. But back to the episode, there are a ton of standout moments for me in this one. I mean, I'd argue that every scene is memorable for one reason or another, but I really love Huey's line at the end of the episode after an entire day of dealing with the most ignorant and toxic aspects of the Black community, to the point where he actually cracks and goes on this epic rant venting his frustrations to an entire courtroom of R. Kelly supporters. Also, pour one out for the god Adam West.
Maybe R. Kelly did urinate on this woman, but America urinated on R. Kelly.
Adam West was always on some wild shit. Like Adam West, he was on fucking Fairly Odd Parents as the fucking Catman or whatever. Adam West was always willing to do some wild stuff, honestly, after doing Batman. Like, he was just chilling. He was collecting them bags.
Episode 3 is called Guess Hoes Coming to Dinner, which is a clever little play on the Sidney Poitier film of a similar name. This episode follows Granddad's whirlwind romance with a, let's say...
You do realize that light-skinned hoe is a hoe, right, Granddad?
Don't cuss, boy, now. Watch your mouth.
I didn't cuss. I said hoe.
Hey, Boondocks is so fucking elite.
Lady of the Night. Her name is Cristal, like the champagne. On top of being fucking hilarious, this episode also serves as a great analysis of the dangers of becoming a simp that I definitely appreciate more as a grown man now than I did as a kid. And this feels like as good of a time as any to highlight the music in the Boondocks. The intro theme is a certified banger. That's not even to be discussed. But it can't be understated how much of a pivotal role that the background music plays in adding to the vibe and tone of the series. A majority of the music in season 1 consists of these soothing, wandering, and sometimes really solemn piano compositions that add to the peaceful suburban atmosphere that the show takes place in. There's also this really good mix of smooth late 90s boom bap hip hop and soulful jazz and blues that really spice up scenes when they come in. But back to the episode. Beneath all of the comedy here, there's a pretty sad story from both sides of Granddad and Cristal's romance. Despite her beauty and all of the things that she's able to manipulate men into giving her, Cristal lives a very chaotic and uncertain life, and even though Granddad offers her a way out and a chance to a normal and safe life, she ultimately denies it, knowing that she's not the type of person who can be content with a steady job and home life. This leaves Granddad, a man who's terrified of spending his final years alone after living through about 3 lifetimes worth of Black American craziness, to face the reality that he may never find a woman who truly loves him. Which is what makes the ending scene of Granddad falling asleep in the kitchen, waiting for Cristal to come back, so sad to me. Oh yeah, pour one out for the god John Witherspoon.
Pops, R.I.P.
Episode 4 is another banger entitled Granddad's Fight. And wouldn't you know it, the entire episode is about Granddad fighting some old crazy blind dude. The old crazy blind dude in question is named Stinkmeaner. And this is the episode that introduces the concept of nigga moments, which are an all too real phenomenon of American Black culture. As Huey explains,
You're about to experience
Until you got kicked in your chest.
nigga moment. Webster defines a nigga moment as a moment when ignorance overwhelms the mind of an otherwise logical Negro male,
What did you say, bitch nigga? Hey, squeeze it, nigga.
causing him to act in an illogical, self-destructive manner, i.e., like a nigga.
nigga moments derive from the inner hatred and negativity that many Black men in America are conditioned to seal deep within themselves. Colonel Stinkmeaner is the physical embodiment of that hatred and negativity within the Black community. He represents the dark cloud of violence that seems to follow Black people everywhere we go, whether that be churches, grocery stores, nightclubs, even our own neighborhoods. It's a cloud that could cause lightning to strike us at any time for seemingly no good reason. There is no good reason for Stinkmeaner's actions, and there's no way to reason with him. The only thing he desires is the destruction of his enemies, and his enemies are anyone who happens to be in his way. But on a lighter note, this episode also introduces Granddad's New Shoes song, which is a melody he ends up singing several times throughout the show, and one that gets stuck in my head all the goddamn time.
New shoes, new shoes. Boy, Nike makes some good shoes.
Episode 5 might be a top 5 episode of all time, and it's called The Health Inspector. There are a million reasons why this episode is so great, but the two most important to me are the introductions of Ed Wunsler III and Jin Rummy as a duo. Possibly my favorite side characters of any show ever. These two might be the most consistently funny characters in the entire series.
You gotta be tactful.
Tactful? What that mean? He talking about diplomacy. I don't do diplomacy. English, motherfucker, do you speak it? What the fuck y'all looking at? I don't care if it's mama to ass, grandmama, innocent.
Oh my god. Samuel L. Jackson is elite, but this shit is just so fucking funny. Right after having a whole ass shootout at a gas station, comes out on some
English, motherfucker, do you speak it? What the fuck y'all looking at? I don't care if it's mama to ass, grandmama, innocent bystanders, little kids, babysitters, bill collectors, whatever. I leave his whole block filled with hot brass if I have to. And you know why? Because I just don't give a fuck.
Go ahead. Name a more iconic duo. Being a little kid when I first watched this show, I didn't even realize that they were supposed to be young, gangsta-ass versions of George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld. But now that I know that, it makes their already hilarious hijinks even more amazing to watch. Especially since the voice the blackest actors ever in Charlie Murphy and Samuel L. Jackson. That's also another reason why the scene at the gas station is the greatest Iraq War metaphor joke that you have ever seen.
Fuck this shit. Whose side you on? Mine or this motherfucker who's obviously of terrorist descent?
Oh yeah. Pour one out for the god Charlie Murphy.
Charlie
Episode
Murphy
6
as well. R.I.P. God damn.
is called The Real, and despite being about reality television, this episode feels more surreal than any other point in the series. The quick synopsis is that Riley coaxes Granddad into lying about his health and occupation to gain access to a bunch of increasingly extravagant reality TV shows in order to get, what else but fame, women, and money. All of this happens while Huey is being spied on by a secret agent he calls White Shadow. Just like a typical reality show of that era, the characters give confessionals throughout the episode about the events that are transpiring. Riley and Granddad's are pretty hilarious and par for the course for their characters, but it's Huey's that are the most interesting to me. His final confessional was especially interesting as it takes place after he had spent an entire episode trying to warn Riley and Granddad about the folly of their ways, just to be ignored and disregarded until their plans fell apart as he said they would. I mentioned earlier when discussing Huey as a character that a life spent trying to be a hero is a pretty masochistic and miserable one, and this episode is a great example of the pitfalls that come with trying to fix things that are out of your control. And that's why I love the White Shadow's final remarks to Huey before he leaves.
I know you want to save the world, Huey, but sometimes people have to learn lessons on their own, the hard way. Well, can't miss the idol. If you ever want to talk, remember,
I'm always listening.
I'm always listening.
Episode 7 is titled The Story of Gangstalicious.
Great subplot.
And it deals with rappers who pretend to be something they're not for the sake of profiting off of an image that's popular. Remember when I said that these episodes manage to always stay relevant? This is another one of those. Gangstalicious is Riley's favorite rapper, and if you watch even a few of the episodes of the first season, you'll most likely hear his song Thuggin' Love playing in the background during various scenes. After Gangstalicious gets shot again, Riley takes it upon himself to go to the hospital to protect Gangstalicious himself. Once at the hospital, Riley and Gangstalicious are taken captive by the shooters, and while being driven to what they believe is their graves, Gangstalicious comes clean to Riley about lying about the lavish and also deadly lifestyle that he appeared to lead. And I just realized I haven't really talked about Riley yet, have I? Well, in his own words, Riley would probably describe himself as a real nigga. And that brings with it every positive and negative connotation you can think of. Riley is brash, bold, loud, outspoken, crass, strong-willed, determined, stubborn, selfish, self-sustaining, violent, tough, annoying, prideful, and lovable.
Hell yeah.
While Huey is the stoic core of the show, Riley is his wild and brazen foil. Or in Samurai Champloo terms, Huey is the gene of the show and Riley is the Mugen. Riley tends to cause more issues than he ends up solving, and even though he starts the series as a seemingly one-note antithesis to Huey, more depth to his character is shown throughout the first season, and it starts with this episode. Episode 8 is the obligatory Christmas episode, and surprise, surprise, It's another banger. Huey is hired to make a realistic Christmas play about the life of Black Jesus, or Jesus. Riley is hunting down mall Santas with a BB gun and golf clubs, and their friend Jasmine just wants everyone to share in the joy of Christmas. It's a great special episode that delves into the struggle that many artists face in maintaining their creative freedom and integrity within an industry that is designed to kill that creativity for the sake of financial gain and appeasement of the lowest common denominator. This episode also shows that even someone as overtly cynical as Huey or Riley deep down just want to be happy and believe in childish things like Santa Claus and Christmas miracles. More on that later. There's also some pretty touching moments in this. Hell, even Uncle Ruckus has a touching moment with Jasmine in the end. And trust me, I know I haven't talked about Ruckus yet. More on him later too. Episode 9 is one of the more interesting episodes. The Boondocks already takes place in a fictional and satirical world, so it's all the more intriguing that this episode is just a work of Huey's imagination instead of being something that actually happens in the series. Huey dreams of a world in which Martin Luther King Jr. never died from his assassination attempt in the 60s, but instead went into a 30-year coma and awoke in the 21st century. After a few years spent in modern times, MLK finally realizes that the world he knew is long gone, and despite all of his work for civil rights, Black people are now free from the legal oppression brought about by Jim Crow and segregation, but seem to be in an entirely different predicament. He also basically gets canceled for what would 100% be his viewpoint on 9/11 if he lived to see it, and the idea of people turning on MLK is hilarious to me, because it definitely could happen in today's day and age. After seeing the state of the Black community, MLK gives an impassioned speech at the end of the episode that's very reminiscent of Huey's speech from the R. Kelly episode. The difference this time is that after the speech, the world actually listens to MLK, and in Huey's words, the revolution finally happened. I think the ending of this episode answers why the writers made it a dream instead of reality, because Huey's ideal world is not one in which everything is nice and peaceful, but one where his voice actually matters. He knows what he believes is right, but he gets shut down and ignored so much that it feels like he'd have to be the ghost of Martin Luther King Jr. for his opinions to be considered. And that, once again, is a sobering reminder of the real world. Episode 10 is one that I tend to forget about, but one I always love to rewatch when I remember it. It's called The Itis, and it's an entire episode about the unhealthy and destructive eating habits that come with Black culture. There's also some great messages about the destructive nature of urban development being used as a tool to fatten the pockets of white landowners, but that's a little too much to get into for this video, and it's already very long as it is. I actually don't have much to say about this episode other than that. Despite it not being very deep in terms of character development, it's a pretty solid episode. Oh, and Ed Asner as Ed Wuncler Sr. is hilarious and probably the most underrated character in the entire show.
Would you like to sign our petition to get more humane treatment for immigrant workers?
If you don't get that bullshit out of my face, bitch.
And also, pour one out for the god Ed Asner.
Yeah,
a lot of people who are in the show are dead now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Episode 11 is called Let's Nab Oprah, and it's a very welcomed return of Ed and Rummy as a duo. Well, Riley being with them makes him a trio, but you get my point. After a string of hilariously frustrating robbery fuck-ups, the trio decide that they need a big score to knock them out of their funk. They brilliantly decide to, you guessed it, kidnap talk show legend Oprah Winfrey when she comes to Woodcrest to shoot an episode of her show. Huey eventually catches on to this plan and tries to stop them. Besides Ed and Rummy, my favorite aspect of this episode is the brotherly dynamic shown between Huey and Riley. We finally see them fight each other both physically and mentally in this episode. Both of them are scheming against each other and trying to guess the other's next move before they make it. It's both funny and oddly heartwarming watching such an over-the-top depiction of a toxic big brother-little brother relationship. Great episode all around. Episode 12 is another one of my favorites, and it's titled Riley Was Here. In this episode, we learn that Riley is actually quite the young artist. Unfortunately for everyone in Woodcrest, he decides to show that artistic talent through putting graffiti on all of their houses. One night out while defacing other people's property, Riley meets a white man with a big afro and a very soothing voice who is definitely not supposed to be famous white painter Bob Ross. The not Bob Ross white man helps Riley improve one of his murals, but when Riley gets caught by the cops, Granddad forces him to take art classes as a better outlet for his artistic creativity.
Still got the spray paint on his arm.
Riley learns that his new art teacher is the same laid-back white man from the night he got caught by the police.
Hey.
After some initial reluctance on Riley's part, the art teacher eventually convinces Riley to start doing graffiti around the neighborhood again, but this time with a more mature and refined artistic style. Funny enough, after Riley does this, the people of Woodcrest are actually appreciative of the graffiti and become fans of the artist. The only problem is that no one will believe that it's Riley no matter how much he swears it was him. Even his grandfather refuses to believe that Riley has the talent to be a truly great painter.
Damn.
Riley is then forced to paint something that only he could paint, something so personal that it would prove to his grandfather that he was the artist all along. So, in one of my favorite moments in the entire series, Riley finds a picture of his deceased parents on their wedding day, and with the help of his art teacher, they paint a giant mural of Riley's parents on the front of Granddad's fancy new home. And when Granddad walks outside the next morning, he's brought to tears by the beautiful image that his grandson left for him. And this whole sequence is done to the tune of Today by Tom Scott and the California Dreamers, which you may not recognize at first, but give it a listen, and I'm sure you'll remember it from somewhere. My words cannot do this episode or this sequence proper justice. It's fucking amazing, and I love it more and more every time I rewatch it. Oh, and there's this whole B-story plot about Huey brainwashing himself by doing a Super Size Me-esque science experiment, but instead of eating McDonald's, Huey's just watching nothing but black television for a month, which is a joke that would become much more prominent and also problematic in later seasons.
Right.
Episode 13 is yet another banger. This episode is called Wingmen, and it's an episode about Granddad and Huey's past. Granddad finds out in the beginning of the episode that his former friend from another life, named Mo, recently passed, and the funeral is being held in the family's hometown of Chicago. With a promise that there will be something for him in Mo's will, Granddad takes the boys back to Chicago with him. This also gives Huey a chance to reconnect with his hometown best friend named Cairo. When they get back to their hometown, Granddad finds out that Mo lived a very extravagant life off of falsely claiming Granddad's accomplishments.
Oh, damn.
This reminds Granddad of why he cut ties with Mo in the first place. Huey, on the other hand, comes back to find that Cairo was so upset with Huey leaving Chicago for Woodcrest that he replaced Huey with another, much cornier version of Huey.
Oh, no.
Huey and Cairo end up fighting at the funeral when things come to a head. But Granddad comes to the realization that even though Mo was an asshole, he was still his closest friend, and a lifetime without him has been a lifetime of loneliness. I think we all have that one friend that we know is a piece of but we still hang out with them anyway for reasons that we don't really understand. It can be easy to cut ties with that person when it's clear that they won't change, but it's also good to realize when certain petty things don't matter in the long run. They might annoy you here and there, but ultimately you're friends for a reason, and it's important to not lose sight of the joy that you bring into each other's lives.
Exactly.
Huey, on the other hand, gets a much harsher lesson, and it's a lesson that people have tried to tell him all season. You can't save everyone, and you can't fix everything. Some people and some issues are beyond your control, and whether you're in the right or not, it doesn't really matter. Trying to make things better sometimes can only cause you more pain. It's a cold lesson for anyone to learn, but it's an absolutely necessary one.
You got knocked the... Never mind.
Episode 14 is a pretty great homage to the famous Spike Lee film Do the Right Thing. It's called The Block is Hot, and there's a running theme about the heat making people crazy throughout the entire episode. The quick rundown is this. To combat the heat wave going through Woodcrest, Huey's friend Jasmine does what many other suburban kids do during heat waves and decides to start up a lemonade stand to make some extra money. Unfortunately for her, Ed Wunsler Sr. happens to be in the neighborhood and decides to do what predatory rich white men do best and sabotage a minority's business from the inside while making tons of money for themselves and leaving said minority destitute in the end.
Goddamn.
Even though Huey tries to warn Jasmine about what will happen as soon as she agrees to do business with Ed Wunsler, Jasmine quickly becomes blinded by the empty promises that Ed Wunsler has given her and disregards Huey's warnings as the desperate cries of a miserable person who just wants everyone else to be as miserable as he is. I should point out that when Jasmine says this to Huey, it might be the only time we see Huey genuinely frown in the series. Like, he obviously never smiles, but he also doesn't really look sad outside of this moment either. And I haven't mentioned Jasmine much in this video, but she definitely plays an interesting role in the series to me. If Riley is Huey's foil, then Jasmine is Huey's, whatever literary term means, supportive confidant. Oftentimes, when others don't believe in Huey or don't listen to Huey, Jasmine is there to listen and support him during his crazy plans or conspiracy theories. When no one showed up to or stayed awake for Huey's Christmas play, Jasmine was there, clapping and cheering for him. When no one believed Huey that the white shadow was real, Jasmine had no doubts that he was telling the truth as soon as he mentioned it to her. And when Huey got headbutted by his former friend Cairo, Jasmine was back in Woodcrest waiting to cheer him up. There are other examples throughout season 1 and the entire series of Jasmine being there for Huey when no one else is, even if Huey doesn't seem to want her there sometimes. And though their relationship is one of the more understated aspects of the show, it's pretty touching whenever you see glimpses of how much they actually care about each other. Which is another reason why I love the ending of this episode, when after the utter chaos that breaks out in the climax, as soon as the snow starts to fall and Jasmine gets cold, despite her trying to push him away earlier, Huey instantly hands her his scarf because she's always been there for him, and he knows that he owes it to her to be there for her. And finally, we get to the season 1 finale, The Passion of Reverend Ruckus. Full disclosure here, this is not just my favorite episode of the Boondocks, but my favorite episode of pretty much anything ever. And one of the reasons is that this episode heavily features one of the most controversial characters of the series, Mr. Uncle Ruckus.
No relation.
No relation.
I said multiple times that Huey is the protagonist of the Boondocks, and if that's the case, then Ruckus is definitely the antagonist of the Boondocks. No matter where Huey, Riley, or Granddad go, no matter what they do, Ruckus is always there to verbally terrorize them with his toxic and hypocritical black white supremacist rhetoric. Uncle Ruckus is rarely, if ever, meant to be the voice of reason in the Boondocks. He's the only part of the main cast that is never shown in a positive light. He's a disgusting, abhorrent, and irredeemable human being, and holy shit do I love him for it.
Sure,
Ed and Rummy might be my favorite side characters, but Uncle Ruckus is the funniest character in the show, and it's not even close. Almost every line of dialogue that comes out of his mouth is the most offensive, racist remark you've ever heard, but it's delivered so well and what he says is so outrageous that I can't help but laugh with my hand over my mouth whenever I watch it.
Thank God for the white man's code of law. It's the only way to keep these crazy niggas under control. Well, that and pepper spray. The white man made a tragic misjudgment when he made it legal to teach niggas to read and write. Well, I'd expect a heathen niglet like Riley to say something like that. Just don't stay too long, darkies. Say that again. I couldn't hear you over the sound of me shitting myself.
The episode begins with Ruckus dreaming of Ronald Reagan. Great callback to the first episode.
Out of pocket. Completely out of pocket at every moment.
Taking Ruckus on a tour through white heaven and explaining that even a man as black as Ruckus can find salvation in white heaven if he teaches the world to hate blackness as white God demands. After this dream sequence, Ruckus finds out that he's dying and decides to spend his final days preaching to the world about hating blackness in order to find peace in white heaven. Sounds crazy, but crazier beliefs have found traction in the American zeitgeist before. And after some strategic political backing, Ruckus ends up becoming a national sensation, and his racist hate speech masked as religious epiphany becomes extremely popular. While this is happening, Huey is thinking of ways to get his imprisoned Black Panther friend who is currently on death row pardoned for his crimes, which he very clearly did not commit. Huey tries everything he can think of, even random anonymous blackmail to every governor in the country. Despite Huey's best efforts, it seems that nothing short of a miracle could get his friend cleared of his charges. So with no other option to turn to, Huey decides that he'll have to sneak into the prison himself and break his friend out, literally risking his own life and future to do the right thing. The only problem is that Huey is still a 10-year-old boy without a driver's license, and his granddad coincidentally needs the car the same night as Huey's prison break to stop Ruckus from spreading more hate speech on a national stage. Huey's grandiose and absurdly dangerous plan is foiled before it can even be started because he couldn't get a ride. At this point, Huey has felt an entire season's worth of futility, frustration, and helplessness. He's been unable to save his fellow black brothers and sisters, unable to save himself, and he's been unable to get people to listen to him or the problems of others. During a terrible thunderstorm that night, he sits at his usual hill above the neighborhood and reflects on his failures. And while doing this, he completely breaks down. He cries his eyes out as he realizes that there's only one thing left that he can do. He drops to his knees and he prays to a God he doesn't even believe in for help. He He prays to God that just once in this twisted, biased, and fucked up world, that just once, things can turn out the right way. And just as he finishes his prayer, Ruckus cries out on stage amongst a scene of racial bedlam that he himself has created, that if he and his teachings are wrong, then let God strike him with lightning right now. The lightning strikes Ruckus directly in his tumor, clearing him of any terminal disease. The lightning strike also shuts off the electricity to the city, including the cell where Huey's friend was about to be executed in. At the same moment, an anonymous blackmail threat Huey sent to every governor reaches one of those governors' desks, and they make the call to free Huey's friend. Huey prayed for a miracle, and it finally came. But as Huey says at the end of the episode, we make our own miracles, and I couldn't agree more. In the show overall, Huey is the embodiment of reason, and Ruckus is the embodiment of insanity. So the dichotomy of the two plot lines showing Ruckus gradually rising to his highest level of influence, and Huey's voice and Huey's opinions gradually falling to their lowest point of relevance, was executed to near perfection here. And both stories being brought together at the end with this miracle event that vindicates Huey while striking Ruckus back down to earth was pure genius. And that's why, in my opinion, this is the best ending to the best episode in the best season of the best show ever made. So that's the Boondocks, or season 1 of the Boondocks at least. A series truly unlike anything before or after. As I've said, it's my favorite show ever, and after this very long review, I hope you can kind of understand why. Watching the Boondocks for the first time, when it aired all those years ago, and watching the Boondocks now as an adult, still feels the same. It's like looking at a reflection of myself and seeing things I've never been shown before. I'm sure you all have your favorite show or movie or book or whatever that makes you feel a similar way. Something that allows you to escape reality and shows you a more interesting side of it. Something that lets you laugh at what would usually cause you pain. I hope you enjoy whatever piece of art that may be. Enjoy it like a dream you can always revisit. It's fun to dream, isn't it?
That was fire. Yo, yes, to a review. Good shit. You know, like you said, Boondocks, especially when it comes to like adult animation in general, coming up, animation, anime and stuff aside, of course, Boondocks was definitely one of those like pivotal cornerstones of just like perspective and storytelling of like to a degree of the relatability that you just weren't accustomed to as like young black kids and whatnot, especially when it comes to not just like adult animation obviously, but just like cartoons and everything. Like it's rare that you get not only respectable, see that's the thing about it, like not only did you, even though it was how highly like disrespectful and like crude the humor could be at times, it was still like one of the more positive and respectful adaptations and showings of like black culture, even though it was making fun of black culture directly. It wasn't like, it is poking fun of it, but at the same time, it's like, something that we can laugh at together versus like feeling like you're just the butt of the joke and whatnot. Just because these caricatures are so exaggerated to these degrees. But yeah, how y'all feel about some of these adult animations, that we came up on? Not even just adult animation. Because I would say, even though it has a more adult jokes, it's definitely meant for more like teenage to young adult aspects. So, because especially with like some of the subject matter and everything, and even some of the jokes are definitely meant for like an all wider audience. Like with the one slurs and everything, they definitely seem like more. Those jokes are catered to a wider age demographic, but still, even as like coming up as younger kids watching this, it was still able to dissect and understand the subject matter of these, you know, stereotypes and messages that they're trying to portray in these, you know, exaggerated sequences. So yeah, no, this is the Boondocks, you know, our little deep dive reaction. You know, hope y'all enjoyed there. YouTube, I'll catch y'all later.